There are some things that you just assume will always be the way they are. The North Pole, for one. Well, not only is that an incorrect assumption of the past, magnetic north is actually on the move right now, shifting away from Canada and towards Siberia. To find out why and what it means for this country, we're joined by science journalist Alanna Mitchell. It's just part of the fascinating story told in her book, The Spinning Magnet, the force that created the modern world and could destroy it. And Alanna Mitchell joins us now. Boy, that's not a provocative title at all, is it? Holy cow. Yeah. The North Pole is moving towards Russia?
It is.
How come?
Well, the magnetic North Pole is moving toward Russia. There are a bunch of them.
There's actually 4 North Poles, right?
Well, there are 4. If you're a geographer, that's how you see the world. Yes, there are 4.
Should we bring this map up here and you can maybe take us through this?
Sure,
So let's bring it up and we'll describe it for people listening on podcast. Okay, that's a look at the North Pole,
right.
And there's a whole bunch of different things happening there. So
right.
Take us through it if you would.
Okay, so what we're interested in is the red dots. And so that tells us where the magnetic North Pole has traveled over the years. And you can see that it's traveling much more quickly in more recent years as it goes toward the top of the map there. So that's the magnetic North Pole. So what that refers to is the one spot on the top of the planet where the magnetic field lines that our planet generates go in. And that's a description of the whole magnetic field. The geomagnetic North Pole, which is the blue dots on that same map, that's another way of describing the magnetic field, but it's a very simplified version of the 2-pole system. So not all of the magnetic forces that are going on inside the core of the planet, just simplified into a 2-pole system. And that is also moving, but not as fast.
And the fact that these things are moving is important because why?
Yes, well, they're moving because there is, our planet is a giant magnet, and it creates its own magnetic field within the core, the hot, molten magnetic outer core of the planet. So there's all this heat that's trying to escape from the core of the planet. And as it escapes, it creates these electrical fields in this molten metallic material. And those electrical fields create magnetic fields which surround our planet. So these field lines go right now out the south of our planet. This is the geographic south of our planet, come in the north. And there's this massive field that protects us from solar and galactic radiation.
So this is the importance of the magnetic field.
That's what it does, yeah. It protects the atmosphere, it protects life on Earth from all this, from solar storms, from solar winds, from radiation. So within this magnetic outer core where our magnetic field is created, there are all these sort of alternate factions that are fighting it against each other. So there's the main one, which is a 2-pole system, and then which is what we really respond to, our compasses are responding to as we are on the surface. But within that core, there are all these other factions that are fighting for dominance. They're trying to topple this 2-pole system. And it's like the battle of the titans in there. And sometimes those, they get stronger than the 2-pole system, and they do topple it. And then the direction of the field has to change, so the poles change places.
Do scientists have any idea when whatever final shifting is going to take place will take place?
No.
They don't know.
They really don't know. So it was a revelation back at the beginning of the last century. So in 1906, when the very first paper came out describing the fact that the poles had at one other time in the planet's history been on opposite sides of the planet from where they were in 1906. This was a revolutionary thing that just shook up science for decades. They couldn't even figure out how this could have happened. But in the decades since, they've discovered that in fact the poles have reversed many, many times, hundreds of times over the course of the planet's life. And it's aperiodic, so you can't tell when it's going to happen. Unlike the sun. The sun's poles reverse about every 11 years.
When did it last shift?
The Earth's poles last shifted 780,000 years ago.
Silly question, but how do you know?
Yeah, well, you can tell by, it leaves a record in the rocks. It leaves a record in there are some rocks that sort of lay down the magnetic coordinates of the field at the time when they cool. And so there's this absolutely beautiful, precise record.
If there, or I guess when there, is another shift of the poles between north and south, what impact does that have on those of us who are fortunate enough to live on this planet?
That's a huge question, and scientists are still really trying to figure that out. So this is not settled science. What we know for sure, though, is that a lot more solar and galactic radiation will come closer to the surface of the planet. And
that doesn't sound good.
Well, we also have an atmosphere that protects us. So it's a buffering system for all that extra stuff. But it's not clear how much extra radiation will hit the surface of the planet. Scientists are not too alarmed about that. What they're much more alarmed about is the fact that our civilization has become dependent on electricity. And electrical grids are, dramatically affected by solar storms. Already, when we have solar storms, we get, outages. You remember the one in Quebec in 1989 that took out the grids for many hours. But if you have a much weaker field, see, when the poles are reversing, the magnetic field goes down to about 10% of its usual strength. And so there's extra sort of space for all that magnetized plasma from the sun to hit the surface of the earth and course through the electrical grids that we've set up. The electrical, it's almost like a cocoon that we've set up that protects us from non-electric life. Like it's our almost like our central processing system, and it can be very badly affected by all these solar storms. So the concern is over how vulnerable all these electric and electronic systems are to solar storms when the field is reversing.
And we don't know the answer to that question.
We don't know the answer to that question.
And do we have a sense about when we should start to be on the lookout for that kind of thing happening?
Well, scientists are saying, and scientists are cautious people, but they're saying we should start to think about how tightly interconnected the grid is, our electrical grid with our, say, nuclear power stations, how interconnected that has become over time. We've built up this whole electrical infrastructure at a time when the field protecting us, the magnetic field, has been relatively strong. It's weakening now, and it's becoming much more interconnected, and we're becoming much more dependent on it, and on satellites, for example, which are also vulnerable to magnetic storms as the field weakens. And so scientists are saying, with an eye to caution, we should be thinking about how interconnected these are, figuring out how we can predict storms more accurately, how we can, solar storms meaning, and how we can, harden our systems against these magnetic surges that will come.
That's what I was going to ask. Should we be doing anything about this now?
They think we should, yeah.
As of now?
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, trying to figure out how to harden up the grid so that they're not as affected, or how to make them so you can shut parts of them down. If you know that a solar storm is going to hit a certain latitude, could you shut down some of those electrical grids on that system so that they don't just flame out?
I can't even imagine whose job it would be to sort of be responsible for that. Do you know?
Well, no. There are some international bodies that have been set up essentially in the wake of a big, we had a huge solar storm in 2012, July 2012, which very few people know about because it happened that the Earth was not facing the part of the sun that had this immense solar flare. But it was one of these, it's called a superstorm, a super magnetic storm from the sun. And it would have been devastating for the Earth's infrastructure, except that it happened to be facing away from the Earth when it hit. But they've done a whole forensic analysis on what would have happened to the Earth had we been struck by that storm, that superstorm. And it rang bells with, for example, former President Barack Obama, who said, wait a sec, I need to understand what would have happened. And so that was the trigger in 2012 for a whole bunch of investigation of what should we be doing to try to prepare.
The public is only starting to get its head around how we need to change our lifestyles because of climate change.
Correct.
So we ought to add this to the list as well?
It doesn't keep scientists up at night. It's not imminent. We don't know. See, the thing is, if you've got solar storms and the field is weakening and the poles are reversing, then you've got a whole other vulnerability that, compared to what we've got now. But it's not... Don't stay up worrying about it at night. They say it's just something that we should be thinking about because we're dependent on electricity.
What does the movement of the magnetic north in a practical sense mean?
Well, the interesting thing about this really fast-moving magnetic north. So it's cantering off there in the Arctic toward Siberia, into Siberian territory, which is fascinating in itself. But what it tells us is that, that battle of the titans I was describing in the core, well, it means that it's even more turbulent in there than it has been in the past little while. So when the North Magnetic Pole is moving relatively sedately through the north, there's turbulence in that core, but it's not the turbulence that we're seeing now. Like since, you could say 2000, there's been just this extra volatility. And so the North Magnetic Pole has just been racing across the north. I think it's 55 kilometers a year to the northwest. And that's incredibly fast.
And is cantering.
It's really fast. And so that tells scientists that there's extra turbulence going on in the core. And that may be, they're not sure, but they're tracking that in case it's one of the indicators that the poles are getting ready to reverse.
I'm going to quote you to you, okay?
Oh, okay.
Here's what you wrote in Macleans magazine earlier this year. At the moment, the only North Pole that is indisputably Canadian is the geomagnetic one. After a stint in Greenland at the beginning of the 20th century, it is now located on Ellesmere Island, Livermore's maps show. Unlike the magnetic North Pole, it is moving slowly. But if Canada were to lose the magnetic, geographical, and geomagnetic North Poles, that would be a psychic blow. A psychic blow in what respect?
Well, we think of ourselves as a northern Arctic nation. I mean, we the North, right? I mean, that's how we identify ourselves. We, especially in the south of Canada, we think of ourselves as part of this Arctic community. And up in the Arctic, the Inuit community has a whole other understanding of what their homeland is. But it's part of our, it's part of the way we see ourselves in Canada. So if we end up losing the North Poles, more than one, the geographical North Pole is just where the lines of longitude connect at the top. So it's the axis around which the planet moves. So you've got the magnetic North Pole, which is racing across the Arctic. You've got the geomagnetic pole, which right now is in Ellesmere Island, which is moving slowly. And then you've got the geographical North Pole, which is in dispute. Nobody knows exactly who owns that because it's an undecided spot. So the point of the thing I wrote in Macleans is that if the geomagnetic North Pole also decamps, say to Greenland or so the Denmark territories, do we have any poles at all? Do we have a North Pole?
I was going to say, we are among a number of nations that are staking a claim to that area.
Correct.
What have we done to indicate to the world that we think this is ours?
We made a claim to the UN. So we've been mapping there are different ways of deciding. The international bodies will have to decide who owns it. But the way you try to stake your claim is to say, well, your continental shelf goes out to a certain point, and therefore, we get, an exclusive economic zone that goes beyond that by 200 nautical miles. So what we've been trying to do in Canada is map all these continental shelves to see exactly how far we think our territory goes. But of course, Russia and Denmark have done the same thing.
Right.
And there are overlapping claims there.
Even more importantly than that, I think we've told the world that if you want to send a note to Santa Claus, you got to send it to Canada.
Listen, Santa is Canadian. I mean, let's be clear about this. Santa Claus has a passport that says Canada on it, kids from all over the world send their Christmas notes to Santa, and we even have a postal code.
Yeah, ho ho ho,
right?
For sure.
That's it. So it's part of it's knitted into our psyche. So geographical North may or may not be Canadian. Magnetic North is definitely going into Russia, so the Russians are taking the North Pole, if you will. This is the great joke in geophysics societies. They say, oh, well, Siberia's stealing our North Pole. It's dry humor.
I was going to say, they are madcap when it comes to humor, aren't
they really are,
those folks,
over the top.
I would like, if you can, to do a little political comparison here, because I do remember when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, he traveled to the North frequently. He made that a significant part, I think, of his legacy. How does the current Liberal government compare?
Right. Well, the current Liberal government just made the claim to the UN that we should have the geographical North. So this is obviously very interesting to our current federal government. But I think that in the public discourse during the Trudeau years has been more about the rights and the rights of Inuit and Inuvialuit to the north, and a concentration on their their livelihood on how climate change is changing, that livelihood on how the communities there are being affected, more than a sense of, under Stephen Harper, it was more, let's get our rights as Canadians to this whole area so that we can see whether we're going to develop it.
But if the idea is use it or lose it, who used it more?
Hard to tell. It's not really. That's not really how it's determined. It's probably going to be determined by, where the landmass is, and then how do you sort of cut it off and figure out who's closest. And some of the research is saying that will be Denmark, for example. Yeah.
I want to read another excerpt from Macleans magazine. This is going back a few years. This is by Scott Gilmore, the Macleans columnist, and it's of interest for a couple of reasons. Here we go. Canada's north is empty. We stopped trying to develop it generations ago. Earlier generations dreamed of opening up the vast expanses of our Arctic frontiers. The entire reason they pushed our borders north over Hudson Bay, beyond Baffin Island, right to the North Pole itself, is because they expected future Canadians to do something with it. And we can. The minerals are there. They just need infrastructure investments to make them valuable. As climate change opens up the Northwest Passage, Canada could develop shipping and perhaps a commercial fishing industry. If Canada doesn't take advantage of that opportunity, other nations will. And part of the reason that was considered significant is that he's married to the current Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. So, why haven't we invested more in this region to exploit these possibilities if it's so important to us?
This is a complex question.
Okay.
But I'm going to say that, for one thing, I don't know that you can say that it's Canada's exclusively to exploit. I mean, that is the homeland of the Inuit and the Inuvialuit, and there is discourse there about whether development should take place. I know that there are, important political figures like the Northwest Territories leader who feel that it should be there should be industrial development there. I know many people who live in the north who say, not a chance, that this is absolutely not what our future is. So I don't think that's a settled discourse, for one thing. To say even that the Northwest Passage is Canada's waters is inflammatory, because for people who are not Canadian, because that's not the view that is held throughout the world. So it's just a question of, is that the way that, there has to be some sort of thinking about whether that's the way we want the North to go.
What do the Americans have to say about this?
Well, they think that the Northwest Passage could be international waters. And yes, it would be a shorter shipping route if it could be, if it continues to melt. And, at the moment it's melting really, really fast, but it's not fully charted for ships. It's not, it's not clear that it is our, society's, civilization's best route. And what happens when you start putting tankers and, shipping routes through a very fragile system? That's, environmentalists have another whole range of valid points to make about that.
I think when you correct me here, when they go there, American shipping, for example, or submarines, they don't tell us, do they?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, because they think, we don't have to tell you, it's not your water.
There is a claim that it's international.
What's the Arctic Council?
Oh, it's a forum. So it was set up in the a couple of decades ago to as a discussion place. So it's a place of consensus. It's a place of let's talk about some of the big issues that are affecting the entire Arctic Circle. So
and who's on it?
Well, it's Canada and Russia and Denmark and Norway and Sweden and Finland and who have I missed? It's the
America.
America, of course. And then there are a bunch of participants in the same group, and those are the Inuit and the Inuvialuit peoples, indigenous peoples of the Arctic as well, who also have a say. Does
this council have any ability to enforce whatever emerges from it?
No, it's a forum, so it's a place of discussion, but it has a lot of moral suasion. I mean, it's an important place for collaboration, and that's one of the things that's really interesting about the Arctic. I mean, we've been talking about Siberia taking the magnetic north, and we've been talking about some of the disputes in the Arctic. But actually, it's pretty collaborative process. It's very different from the days when, say, Franklin was up there trying to claim the Northwest Passage for Britain, and it was very much an adversarial, let's get there first. I mean, I know that some of the discourse is painted in that way, but actually right now what's happening in the Arctic is pretty collaborative. And there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of cooperation.
And I gather there are a bunch of countries that actually don't have bordering, they don't border the Arctic, and yet they want to be on this council.
Right, like China.
How come?
Well, because there's potential money there, right? I mean, there's the Polar Silk Road, as they talk about it, you know, that China is very interested in perhaps using maybe not the Northwest Passage, maybe the Northeast Passage across the top of Siberia, that could make, you know, could save them money in shipping.
In your view, is it more or less useful to have countries that actually don't border the Arctic being on this council?
I would say less.
Less view.
Well, it's a very, this is a mythical place. The Arctic is a place of our imagination, as well as being a geographical, hard, you know, physical place. It is a place of the human imagination. It always has been. And I'm not speaking for the people whose homeland this is, because for them it's home. But for the people who don't live there, it has been a creation of the human imagination for centuries and centuries and centuries. And so that's what the Arctic Council is too. It's a place where, you know, humans can dream about what could be, and it's valuable for the people who are directly involved to be able to have those dreams and to be able to express them there.
In our last half minute here, is it possible to actually respect the wishes of Indigenous people to kind of leave the land pristine and not exploit whatever's there, and be good stewards of the land, and somehow pursue the mineral wealth that is under that land as well?
It depends on how it's done. It depends on who says it's okay to do it. I mean, it's not an obvious fit. So it's all in the detail.
The devil's always in the details on these matters, aren't they, Alanna?
Indeed.
Indeed. For more on this, the spinning magnet is Alanna Mitchell's contribution to this subject, and we thank you for coming into TVO tonight and sharing your views about it.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.